Today I'm going to show you guys a simple technique how to remove a rig from a car, or if you want to also remove reflections from a car, this might be a good technique for you to apply. So today's image is also sponsored by Christopher List, Christopher_List.com, pretty good automated photographer, and he sponsored this image for us to retouch on today. So yeah, let's get started with the tutorial. I'm going to retouch this bad boy. See you in a minute. Okay, so first of all, what I want to show you guys now is what we're going to comp out. I'm basically just going to create a new help layer over here, okay, and press B for the brush, red foreground color here, and I basically just want to cut out this little arm here and show you guys how I remove this rig arm over here. I'm not going to show too much here how to remove that you can also basically do with the same techniques that I'm using this little side over here. The tutorial will just get way too long, so very simple how to remove that. Use exactly the same techniques that I'm going to show you over here. Then as well here from the top, these little rig arms from the top here and on the right hand side, very simple to remove those. You guys can use the clone stamp tool, healing brush tool, or even the content aware to remove something with that. It's very simple to just copy these areas from the walls. So I'm not going to show that in the tutorial. I'm more or less going to show how to remove this side, or show you guys my technique of how I would remove something like this. Okay, then as well, also today's tutorial here, it's not a very high res file. We're working on a low res file, so bear in mind that all the edges look a little bit blurred once I'm done. So on a high res file, I wouldn't do that, but more of that in the tutorial. Okay, so let's delete our background or our help layer over here. First of all, what I'm going to do now is just build a complete new fender over here. I'm not even going to try to work with my healing brush, cloning stamp tool, or even content aware tool around this area. We could give this a quick try if I'm going to just go with the lasso tool around here and basically just going to try to remove this arm. So selected this area now, pressing marking tool, right click, fill, and in fill I'm going to select here content aware under use. Say OK, and that is rendering for us. And yeah, it's kind of working, but it's, well, maybe we still have to work this top area here, but it kind of looks very weird and dodgy and not good at all. Okay, so what I'm going to do is go back to my history panel, just go here back to my standard settings again. Okay, Command D out of that selection. Now let's start working on this. First of all, I'm going to create a new layer, and I'm going to work around this area here. I'm going to create a path around this whole fender or side, whatever you want to call this. So I'm going to press P for my pen tool, and I'm going to go now along these edges here just with my pen tool. So very slowly trying to make a nice path around this area. Okay, and again, if you haven't worked with a pen tool before, have a look here on my channel. You've got loads of new tutorials or old tutorials where I'm showing how to work with a pen tool. Okay, I'm going to go all the way down until to the edge here again and just completing the path over here. Now I'm not going to go in here, I'm going to go upwards here. So select again your last anchor point, and I'm just doing a very straight line. Okay, over here somewhere, and I want to do a little bit of a round curve here, not going with a straight edges here. So I'm going to select another anchor point over here and just going to try to make a fairly decent round path here. Okay, to the top, and also complete that path. Okay, so now we have a path here. I'm just going to zoom out a little bit. Also now with the pen tool, press right click and say make a selection out of this. Then as well, zero feathering as well. If you're working on a high res, you also want to choose a 0 pixel for that. Okay, and now we have a nice selection around here. First step that I'm going to do now is press M for marking tool, and I'm going to save this selection in case I want to call it up again and work again with it. Okay, so right click again with marking tool, and I'm going to go here to save selection. Hit save selection. In here I'm just going to write here car 1 or something like that. That will help me. Car 1, and I also want to have a new channel for that in case I want to go back in and change something. Okay, so I'm going to hit OK now, have a new path here. As I've also go back to my path, I have my working path over here, and we have a selection. Now what we're going to do is work with the gradient tool and add some new gradient or fill into this whole selection. So let's go over to the gradient tool over here, and first of all we need to build a new gradient. So I've already done that in the previous version, but I'm going to do that again for you guys. So just calling up the gradient picker here, or the gradient editor from the top application menu. Now what I'm going to do is go back to new over here. Oops. Now what I'm going to do is press new again, and we're already having 3 new layers here, pressing too quick. So basically what I'm going to do now is just select an old gradient over here that I already have. I don't need to work or actually create a complete new gradient. If you want to, you can also rename that gradient. What I'm going to do now, under gradient type, I'm choosing the solid color, smoothness 100, and in here yours will most probably be white or black or just a weird color. We first of all have to set the colors right. Okay, so I'm going to take the top slider here, move it all the way to the right, and double tap here on the bottom slider. Let's also just take the gradient box a little bit to the side. First of all, what I want to do now is I want to find a proper color, or basically the same color, the same lightness and darkness tones as we have down here. As you guys can also see, the light is obviously a little bit darker down here and a lighter a little bit up here. So obviously we have to have a grade that's fading from dark into lightness. So that's what I'm trying to achieve. So I'm going to pick a very dark color from down here. As you guys can also see, there's a little bit of a purple touch to that. So I'm going to select that, maybe a little bit darker even. Okay, so that's going to be my first dark color. I'm going to say OK for that, and that's going to be selected here. And then I'm going to double tap here on the right hand side as well, and also going to get a very light color, which is somewhere over here in the corner. Okay, and that has a little bit of a more bluish touch to it. So selecting that color, hit OK as well from the color picker, and we have now already pretty much a new gradient. What I'm also still going to say is here on the left hand side, select that again, and I want to have the color, yes, location, that's alright, and I just to the top just want to check that it's 100% opacity. Okay, the same on the right hand side as well, 100% opacity, and that's good to go. So now what I want to say is OK here, and we have our first gradient now. So let's also create a gradient. So I'm basically going to go down here and just drag the gradient all the way up to have an even tone from dark fading into light. But it's still not too good. Let's try it again. So this is a little bit of a playing process. You want to have it dark down here and getting lighter to the top, right? So play it up a little bit further. Okay. I'm going to try it once more. Somewhere over here, and that kind of looks good for me. I'm just going to press Command D quickly to get out of the selection. Zoom out a little bit, have a look before and after, or basically just how much that gradient is applied now. Okay, let's go back to history. I'm also going to go back to the gradient here because I do want to get back to my selection. Okay, so this is basically now my gradient 1. I'm just going to rename this layer to G1, and now we're going to create a new layer and also create another gradient as well. I'm going to turn off this gradient here, our first gradient, and I'm going to tell you guys now why I'm going to create another gradient. This gradient over here, as you guys can see, it's quite dark here from the side, and if I'm going to switch it off, it's actually light over here, so not darken, it's just darkening down here going into a light area. So with my second gradient now, what I'm trying to achieve is having it light over here and dark over here. Okay, switch that on and switch also the second. We can actually switch off the first layer, go back to G2. I'm just going to double tap here and rename that to gradient 2, and also press the gradient tool again. I'm just going to make a rough gradient over here, so we're getting a little bit of a lighter tone here. Not too good yet, so I'm going to go step back again and do the gradient again. So somewhere over here, just fading in the gradient. So I'm just looking at this little edge here on the side. I'm not worried too much about the rest over here. Literally just looking at the gradient fall off or the lightness that we have over here. So again, press Command Z. I want to go step back again and try the whole process again. Okay, a little bit lighter again. And let's try working with that. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is on the gradient 2, I'm also going to press Command G for the moment. Command D, so get out of the selection. On layer G2 here, so removed again, I'm going to say a new mask here, so masking that out, and I'm also going to hide the mask with Command I, so just inverting that complete and hidden. Okay, so my first G1 layer here is still pretty good, and I'm happy with that, but I still want to add in the second G2 layer a little bit. So we're going to take the brush, also zoom in a little bit, and press B for brush, Control A together to make it super feathered. So our hardness is set back to 0, and around this size it's around good, so maybe diameter around 220 pixels. That's about good. Okay, and now I'm not going to brush like this over here. I'm basically just brushing here with my edge again a little bit. First of all, choosing white foreground color and opacity. I'm going to start around 50 and just slowly, as you guys can see now, fading here. I'm working also on the mask, not on the layer. I'm tapping my way through and just trying to tap in, maybe make my brush a little bit bigger. Okay, and a little bit more. Okay, bringing that lightness back again. So as you guys can see now, it's working a little bit better. Press B again for the brush, and one more. I'm going to also choose a 20% opacity so I can go a little bit closer in. Okay, so that's basically already the first step that I did just for that little brush over here. We can also basically turn off both layers again and have just a look before and after here. Before and after. Okay, and I still want to go back here to the top, and as well from the top bring a little bit of that darkness back. Okay, I'm painting now just with the 20% opacity, so as you guys can see, it's just a little bit, but just from that gradient here that we had before, if I'm going to switch off or just disable the layer mask quickly, you'll see that we did have a little bit of a darkness over here. So this goes into the darkness area as well. Unable that mask again. I'm just brushing again. We can actually create another gradient now. So what we're going to do is press M for marking tool again, right click and say load selection, and we're also going to choose here car 1 for our selection that we saved. I'm going to say OK, and there we have our selection again. I'm going to create a new layer again and just press my gradient tool once again. If you want, you can also create a complete new gradient now with this kind of color to here and color to there, but I'm not going to do that now. I'm basically just going to work now with this gradient tool over here. Press Command Z, just go a step back. I want to have a bigger faded gradient, so it's a little bit smaller. Okay, it's a little bit bigger at the top. Let's try that. Okay, and this is a little bit of a playing thing. You guys need to play with your gradients until you have it to where you want it to be. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that now. It's fading in quite good. Okay, press Command D again. I'm also going to create a hidden mask again on this layer here. I'm going to press here G3, so gradient 3, hold Alt, and now going to create a mask here, so we have a hidden mask already. Okay, so on the hidden mask again, press B for the brush, white foreground color, and I'm now just basically brushing in here at the top a little bit. So it's just fading a little bit darker, and as you guys can see, it matches a little bit better. Let me make my brush a little bit smaller. It's matching around here a little bit better. Okay, as well 20% opacity, so just another tap again. Okay, and that works a little bit better already. Also down here, so this lightness works a little bit too much. Press B again for the brush, switch foreground colors because I want to remove a little bit here from that I brushed in on the second gradient. It's a bit too harsh. Okay, and that's now literally just playing it and until you think it's right. If you think there needs to be another gradient because it needs to be lighter here on this little edge here, then you create another gradient for that. I'm basically going to create a next help layer here to show you guys this a little bit better. Okay, so on the gradient again, new brush here. If you think it still needs to be a little bit lighter over here, you can create a new gradient for that. If you want to also have it a little bit lighter here, you can create another gradient for that. So at the end, I would most probably have 4 to 5 different gradients and then brush them in individually. Okay, so let's press that and we're removing that. What I also want to do now is just create a new group from this. So select all of those 3 layers, press Command G, and we have that in a new group. Now what I still want to do, as you guys can see over here, this edge looks very dodgy, and this one as well. This is because it's not a high-res file. On a high-res image, this would kind of look good. But a small trick that I use on high-res and on the low-res now, but just with individual strengths, what I use is here the blurring tool, and then just with now obviously the low res file just maybe around 10 to 20%, on a high res again 40 maybe 50%. So what I'm going to do now is basically not on the mask, on the gradient itself, I'm going to just literally brush these edges here and break the edges a little bit from the gradient. So over here, as you guys can see, it gets smoother already, but this also needs to be worked a little bit more. Okay, so a little bit of breaking that gradient again. Make my brush a little bit bigger. Sorry, the strength a little bit higher. Okay, brushing that out. Okay, let's also turn off layer 1 or gradient 3, gradient 2, and gradient 1. Okay, so gradient 1 is more of that bad boy. We can also try to create another hidden mask on that. So I'm going to press again Alt and hide that complete mask. Press B for brush. White foreground color with X. I'm 100% opacity now. And I'm just literally going to brush in this area over here. Make my brush also nice and big. And softening that out. As you guys can see here, the edge will be super soft. Okay, and brushing that a little bit more. Okay, so I've got a really soft edge over here. Okay, and now I'm going to switch on again. Here are gradient 2 and gradient 3, and that looks already way better. Okay, so this is again a small process. So just bear in mind that every image is different and that you can use the same techniques on your image, but obviously different gradients and different colors, etc. Okay, so one step that I still want to do now is also create a new empty layer. And just with B, with the brush, and switch it to white foreground color here, I basically want to have at a 50 or say around 40% opacity. I just want to create a little bit of a white spot. So I'm going to make it a little bit bigger and just tap once here into my image. So it's quite a bright now. But now what I can do is use this actually as a spotlight. So I'm going to write here spotlight. Okay, and I can move this layer around now, right? But I can also switch this layer now to soft light. So it's just a little bit softer, but it works like kind of a little light in here, and I can place it say on the corners and some areas to just lighten certain areas again. So I'm going to move it basically just over here somewhere and try to blend it off and in, and this just bleeds in a little bit better again with the complete side that we just created over here. Okay, you can also use again your brush over here, sorry, your mask with B again and black foreground color. I'm just going to brush that side a little bit away from here so I don't want to have the spot everywhere. Just a little bit here on the fender, going more into the fender, not too much on this side. Okay, let me take the opacity up a little bit. Okay, so that's just literally a little bit of a lightness point there again. Just bringing again a little bit of color in here. You can also use now a little bit of a dodge and burning process again to dodge certain areas and burn certain areas, but it's very hard using perfect dodge and burning techniques here on the car. What I'm still going to do now, or mostly do for all last steps that I do on cars and on new fenders and stuff like this, before I go over to color and dodge and burn and etc., all the other stuff, I apply a little bit of a noise layer, because if you have a look now at it, it looks super smooth, and this has a little bit of noise in here. Sorry, let's zoom out a little bit. Every image has noise in it. So as you guys can see now, due to the gradients here, we do have no noise in here. So I need to add a little bit of noise on top. So it's a low res file, so I'm not going to add too much noise, but if it's a high res file, I'm always adding a 2% noise only. Okay, so I'm going to create a new layer now. Press Command A to have the whole selection with, or basically your marking tool, Command A, Control A, press M, and then we're just going to fill this with 50% gray over here in our contents area. Say OK, and we're going to now use this on a soft light, but before we use it on soft light, we're going to go to Filter, Noise, Add Noise. So over here already I have 2% selected. For the low res, I'm just going to say 1% now. Say OK, Command D, and we can change this now to soft light as well. Okay, so as you guys can see, now we have a little bit of noise here on top of this new fender that we just created, and this also brings a little bit more realness back to the whole fender. What I want to do now as well is, obviously I added the noise layer to the complete image, so just say marking tool, and we're going to say load selection here, car fender 1, OK, and we're basically just going to, with again marking tool, right click, select inverse, so we have the outside, and we're going to say delete here. So basically we just applied now a little bit of that noise here. We can also rename that to noise on top of that new fender layer here. If you think that that noise is still a bit too strong, you can also obviously take the opacity down. So that's again giving you just another option to play with that. So in here I'm just going to write here fender. So that's our whole group of fender. You can also put in the noise layer now on top of that, and you know that's all that you did for your fender layer over here. So bear in mind now you can also go back into dodge and burn process now, and just dodge in little small areas, burn all the areas, and just bring this in a little bit better. Now, as I said earlier, also I'm not going to show how to do this here on the top. You can basically use again the same techniques that I used earlier. I'm just going to use a new layer here, show you guys some stuff quickly with a red foreground color on my brush again. So basically again, I would most probably cut out somewhere over here, go around the corner over here, all the way around here, and then go and just work individually on this with a new grade. At some later stage, try to work on both of these layers or these areas over here, so creating a nice new gradient around this area, then again a gradient for here, maybe a new gradient for here and over here, just bringing in some nice color. Then as well over here would work this whole area as another gradient, just bringing it nice and white and a nice push, and then also just clean up these areas here in the front a little bit. So overall, just working with loads of gradients, building a new car out of this, or just fixing all of the stuff on the car. Then later again, dodge and burning, color, a little bit of some color grades, and that's it.
Okay, yeah, so basically that's it for today's tutorial, guys. If you like this episode, please hit us up with a like, support us. Then as well, leave a comment down below if you think there's a different method or if you have a better method, whatever. I'm interested to hear what you guys think about this tutorial. Then as well, don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you all next time in a new tutorial. Bye!